Good morning, Brite family. Thank you, Zane, for that wonderful introduction. I'm realizing we probably should have talked ahead of time about names. So I have two complicated names in my family. One is my daughter's name, which is Adeline, and the other one, which is my husband's name, which is Rube, which many people stumble on both of those. So thank you, and sorry for not gifting you with those names ahead of time. This morning, before I begin, I must confess to you all that this message has not come easily for me. When I first received the invitation to be with you, my immediate response was yes. You see, my cup had just been filled up from Sunday's worship of kicking off the season of Advent, and I thought, surely I can give a word about hope to my fellow Brite students, faculty, and staff. Then it set in. I realized I would be speaking to my fellow Brite students, faculty, and staff, a group of academics and scholars far smarter and more well-read than I. What word about hope could I possibly give to them, especially considering the year we have all shared together? When I began my search for a text today, I thought, well, surely I can go to my liturgical texts because after all, I'm a good Methodist and the lectionary will guide me towards a word of hope. If you have read the Isaiah, 1 Thessalonians, or Luke readings for today out of your lectionary, you may have found, like Dr. Gaffney says, I would have needed to do some wrestling with these texts to bring about a good word. Based on these texts, I felt that was an impossible task to do, considering today is supposed to be a short homily. So I did what any good 21st century student would do while looking for a text in this situation and Googled scriptures about hope. Again, let me remind you, you are a group of academics and scholars far smarter and more well-read than I. I have had to use what tools were available to me in my tool belt. This is when I discovered our text for today. Let me read it for you again. Psalm 119, 113, and 116. I hate the double-minded, but I love your law. You are my hiding place and my shield. I hope in your word. Go away from me, you evildoers, that I may keep the commandments of my God. Uphold me according to your promise that I may live, and let me not be put to shame in my hope. When reflecting on this text, a small section from the longest psalm, as it has 176 lines and verses, I thought a lot about this past year. This long psalm is a wrestling with God. Although this particular psalm is written as a praise of God's Torah, it has highs and lows, ebbs and flows as the writer voices their faith and commitment to God, but still struggles with the oppression and injustice they see and experience in their world. Now, I must name, I personally, as a white privileged cis woman who grew up in the United States, have not known much oppression or injustice personally. Although growing up in the South, I have been witness to much of the oppression and injustice which surrounds me. My first exposure to some of these injustices was when I was just in the 5th grade, delivering turkeys and supplies for a Thanksgiving meal to families who lacked the financial resources to have such a meal. I ran into one of my classmates from school on one of my deliveries, and I had no idea up until that point that we lived such two very different lives. This is one of the many instances when I began to realize where you are born, to whom you are born, what color you are born matters greatly. This classmate and I shared many things in common, like our identified gender, attending the same school, having the same teachers, and growing up in the same town. But our skin colors and socioeconomic class separated our experiences like a vast ocean. This type of systematic racism is one form of injustice I hope 2020 is beginning to chip away at. But honestly, much like the writer of the Psalm, I struggle to believe that is true. I struggle to believe in the promise God gave us through Abraham and Sarah. Earlier in Psalm 119, the psalmist tells God in verse 38, confirm to your servant your promise, which is for those who fear you. Later on in verse 41, the psalmist says, let your steadfast love come to me, O Lord, your salvation according to your promise. I hear the psalmist also requesting a word of hope, a reminder from the divine that what Abraham and Sarah were promised is still true in the psalmist's time. I find myself in a similar place today, also asking for a word of hope from God, clinging to the word I was taught growing up, the words of Mary and the promise conceived within her. In Luke, Mary praises God after discovering she is pregnant with Emmanuel. She gives thanks to God for showing strength by scattering the proud in the thoughts of their hearts, for bringing down the powerful from their thrones and lifting up the lowly, for filling the hungry with good things and sending them away, the rich away empty. All of this being done according to the promise God made with Mary's ancestors, to Abraham and Sarah and to their descendants. In a world of double-minded people who seem to have lost the sight of what God is about, I hope in your word, God, as the psalmist hopes. I hope that Mary's words will come to pass. I hope evildoers will go away, as the psalm says. For according to your promise, you will uphold your servants, so we may live into your promise, and that by hoping, we will not be put to shame. I would like to leave you with some words from the group now known as the Chicks. The song is entitled, I Hope, and is from their album, Taking the Long Way, which was released in 2006. Sunday morning, I heard the preacher say, thou shalt not kill. I don't want to hear nothing else about killing, and it's God's will. Because our children are watching us. They put their trust in us. They're going to be like us. So let's learn from our history and do it differently. I hope for more love, for joy and laughter. I hope you have more than you'll ever need. I hope you'll have more happy ever afters. I hope you can live more fearlessly and you can lose all the pain and misery. I hope. I hope.